Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for session 4 of the webinar training series, Email Creation and Tips. Joining us today is Eric Nilsson. Eric is a Marketo certified expert. He's worked with dozens of Marketo customers to optimize their Marketo programs. He provides an unmatched marketing automation expertise with hands-on instruction and actionable best practices to transform your marketing organization into a demand generation machine. Eric works with Show Me Leads, a marketing automations consulting company. As a technology services provider at Show Me Leads, we craft powerful marketing automation solutions and ensure long-term success with our clients. We do this by customizing and deploying the Marketo platform, generating and nurturing quality leads, ensuring long-term success and lead qualification efforts, and crafting powerful marketing automations to help grow your revenue. Our selection of programs and services address a wide range of problems clients experience, so we can really tailor solutions to meet your unique needs. Whether it's becoming an extension of your marketing team, creating custom email templates, performing health check audits, or assisting with training and integration needs, we really help to optimize your Marketo instance. Now, before we get started, we do want to encourage everyone to submit questions during the webinar. We'll answer these questions at the end of the session during the Q&A portion of the webinar. With that, we can go ahead and get started. Eric, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Courtney. Thanks, everyone, for joining in. I do appreciate it. I would like to start this off with basically, letting you know, let's go here. Letting you know that we are in the fourth of a series of webinars. We covered email programs, data management, and form creation and tips. Today we're going over emails and tips. And next week we'll be going over engagement programs. So that's the last of the series of this particular series. But it is what we'll be doing next week as the last episode, if you want to call it that. So hopefully, I do appreciate you coming today. I do hope you'll be able to join next week as well to talk about engagement programs. But let's get down to today's topic around emails. So today, I'm not necessarily going to go into how to create an email at the base level. I'm assuming that most people have at least created an email and played around with it, probably sent some of those emails, that sort of thing. What I'm going to get into here is are a couple things. One is going to be a couple of key topics that around emails that people may not be as aware of, or at least may not have used before, as well as some tips on testing and that sort of thing in terms of making sure that your emails are looking and functioning correctly. So let's go to emails, and specifically I'd like to start with operational emails. So let's look at the difference between an operational and a non-operational email. First off, a non-operation email is what you're doing most of the time. This basically means that it contains an unsubscribe link and it does not go to unsubscribed leads. This is what most companies do 99% of the time. And we've all lived that life so far. But operational emails are an interesting flavor. They allow you to send to unsubscribed leads, and they do not contain an unsubscribe link. So why would you do that? Right? If they've unsubscribed, they don't want an email from you. Well, this is a situation where your recipient is not going to be able to consider this as an unsolicited commercial email. There are various different scenarios where that might happen. I can give you one that is probably the most common. There are some financial institutions that use Marketo to send out some of their mandatory mailings. There are mailings that they have to do for legal purposes to each and every person who is part of this database of people. So if they don't send this email to somebody who's unsubscribed, they could actually have legal ramifications of that. So what they do is they send those as operational emails to make sure that those get through no matter what. Now, their marketing emails and other such things still go through the non-operational flow, and that's what they need in that situation. But for these legally responsive emails that have to go, then they do operational. That's one example. There are certainly some other examples. Reactivation campaigns. You got to be careful with those, but reactivation campaigns are situations where you can send them a one-time email that says, to an unsubscribed lead that says, hey, do you want to hear from us anymore? Would you like to start hearing from us again? It's not a marketing email, it's a question. It's a little more complicated than we probably want to get into today, but it's definitely something that is doable under the correct circumstances and with all the correct precautions taken. So that's just another example. So how do you do that? Well, you go into your email and you hit Edit Draft, and you go into Email Settings. Once you've done that, you click on the checkbox to make it operational, and that's really all you have to do. It does give you that warning that tells you that you only want to use this for situations where the recipient cannot consider the email as an unsolicited commercial email or spam. Marketo will provide you a link to some more about anti-spam laws when you go into there. Keep in mind the various different countries' spam laws, and you may have to clear, for example, you may have to clear a reactivation campaign through legal. Various different things that you're going to have to keep in mind. So there are very definitive times where you want to use it, very definitive times where you don't, right? So you do that, and then you've basically got an operational email that's ready to go. Again, it will not contain an unsubscribe link, and it will go to unsubscribe leads. So that's one topic that I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of, because it's not used very often, and it's definitely something that is powerful in the right situation. Next up, we have tokens and emails in general, right? So this is just kind of the basics, right? How do I create an email? Just in case somebody has not done this, you're going to go to your program, select New Local Asset, and select Email. You're going to pick a template and pick a name, and that's it, right? You're gonna basically have your email created and it's ready to go. Now, from a content perspective, why do I want to use tokens? Why do I want to personalize the email? Well, what we've seen is that an email that just basically gives information isn't necessarily as attractive as an email where you've given it some sort of personalization so that they know that you know who they are, right? And in most cases, right, they filled out a form, they've opted in, they want to hear from you. It's nice to have, hey, Joe, we have this information for you. It's, in some cases, you may want to put the from as the lead owner. So you can put the lead owner in the front, in the thank you signature. You can have various different information, maybe about their company, in the email, and it just shows that you know who they are, and that you care about them. So more personalization, as we say here, more clicks. You basically can press the token button, which gives you the format. It allows you to insert a specific token into the email, and it's replaced. Whatever you had there before is replaced with the token. Make sure you have a default. So you'll see in that top one here, we have lead.firstname. So that's the field that's going to go into the token. But it has a default value of sir/madam. This is in the case that the value that you want to put in the token is blank. For example, if we didn't get a first name from this lead somehow, we don't want to say dear blank. We want to say, or hi blank in this case, we want to say hi sir and or madam, or hi there. I've seen as well, with an exclamation point at the end, just to be super friendly. So that is, a piece that's very powerful in Marketo. You don't want to overdo the tokens. You don't want to get too familiar with them. But at least name, maybe lead owner, maybe company name, something like that is a good thing to have in there. Text version of emails. So let's talk about that for a moment. The text version of an email is going to allow you to get through to email clients that don't show images, and not just ones where they've turned images off, but where it's just not capable. Nowadays, there aren't many of those left. Most email clients now support images and HTML content, but they're still out there. Some customers will use that only for specific emails where they don't want to take the chance of having some sort of scripting or something in their email. So maybe they'll sign up with that email address for marketing specific stuff when they fill out a form or something like that. There's various different pieces and ways to go about that. So always have a text version. You can hit copy from HTML, which will bring everything on the left over to the right, and then you just need to manually make edits that are appropriate for that specific area that may be different. For example, the token, something that you maybe you had a call to action button that was an image, and so there was no text associated with it. Then you're going to want to have that button in text. Your links would have to go manually in there. You'd actually have to have the HTTP address into the text version. All those kind of things that you'll see when you bring it over, just so that it comes through in a way that a text-only user can view it. Oh, one thing I forgot as well, and I wanted to put that in there as well, was tokens in the from and reply to. So I talked about lead owners in the footer of an email, but you can also have it in your from and reply to. So if you want you want this email to go to Joe, and Joe gets the email and they want to reply to this email coming from their lead owner, you can have the reply to be the lead owner's email address, right? And then when they hit reply, it will go to the lead owner directly rather than some generic email address. This is really common when an email is supposed to look like it's coming from their account owner, and allows them to interact with the account owner at a sales level once the marketing email has gone out. Really nice way of sending. There's other ways you can do it as well, but usually you're going to see this in the case of a sales owner. My tokens. My tokens are very nice and a very cool thing to use. We're going to walk through one specific My token here, but I want to talk about it at a higher level. My tokens are program-specific tokens. So normal tokens, right? You have lead.firstname, lead.lastname, things like that. These are system level lead tokens, right? That are going to pull data from the lead, from the company, from various different pieces of data that we have in Marketo. My tokens are specific to a program, like I said. So what does that mean? Well, you may have some information that you want to put in every email within this program. Various different things that you can have in there, rich text, you can have scripting, you can have a score, anything like that, a date. And you can use that token not only in the email, but also in things like your campaigns, and anywhere where tokens are available. So it's not just an email thing. But you can specifically in this one case, right, we have calendar tokens. So I don't know how many times you've gotten an email where, say for this webinar, For example, I believe we had it in the email for this webinar where there was a link to set up an ICS file. And for those of you that don't know, an ICS file is a calendar file that for some email and calendar clients allows you to basically automatically create a calendar entry in your calendar for that date and time. It works on certain email clients. It doesn't on other email clients, but it's a really nice addition to have to your email, and it's a very powerful thing to do when you make it easier for somebody to not have to manually go into their calendar. They're more likely to put it in their calendar, which means they're more likely not to forget about it. So you pull over the calendar token and you give it a name. We're going to call it Save the Date here. And we're going to put in some information, right? We're going to give it a subject, a location, hyperlink text. So, Save the Date is going to have the hyperlink for it, the start and end times. And then we're going to have some specific tokens that are used for specifically for webinars. It gives them the access URL and the event date and things like that. This is also really nice where you've created the calendar entry. It has the date and time, all that sort of thing. But then in the description, you actually have the link to the webinar. Now, this is a situation where this specifically works with the webinar providers that are linked with Marketo. So WebEx, GoToWebinar, which is what we're using today, and the other ones that are specifically assigned to work with Marketo. That information comes over from the webinar into Marketo and then is able to be entered in through this token. Again, this is just one example of a My Token, but it is probably the most common example that is used in an email. It is very specific to webinars, but very nice thing to do. Again, it doesn't work with every calendar client, but it does add some value when it does. Let's talk also about the ability to download the HTML in an email. This is something that is really underused, I think. What it basically does is it converts your email into HTML, which is basically what's happening when you go to an email client anyways, right? You're loading it as an HTML document within your email client. What this does is it takes the HTML down from the email and allows you to download it and take a look at it at an HTML level to make sure that everything looks appropriate. You can even take that HTML and open it up in a web browser if you want and see how it looks there. It's just various different things you can do with that HTML code that allows you to play around with it. You may even want to use that to create a new template to be able to use for a future email. Maybe you can make some tweaks to it and upload that into an email template. So just something to think about. It's not used very often, but there are some situations, like I said before, that I think this can be pretty valuable. Let's look at view as a web page. Now, just like downloading the HTML, this actually is now for the user. We sometimes have email clients that just don't show it big enough. Not only just phones, right? Phones are a different story, but sometimes you have a small computer screen. Sometimes your email client takes up a lot of screen space with other stuff, and it's just difficult to see the entire email. So what you can do is have a little link at the top of your email that says view as web page. I'm guessing probably most of us have received an email like that, and maybe ignored it, maybe didn't. But it really is nice for people that have kind of these obtrusive email clients that just take up so much space on their screen, and it's just really difficult for them to see. And maybe it's just easier for them to navigate in an HTML doc. Now, obviously, if you're using Gmail or Yahoo or something like that, you're already in a web browser, so it's a little different. But if you're in Outlook or some other hard browser, or sorry, hard client, then this is something that's quite valuable. So what you can do is you can go to Edit Draft and go to Email Settings, and there is a simple checkbox, and that's really all there is, to have Include View as Web Page Link. Really easy to do. And what happens? Well, at the top, you'll get to view this email as a web page. Click here. That will simply open up the email as a web page, and you'll be able to navigate it as if it was a web page. All the links will work, that sort of thing. It's basically just another way to view the email. So let's talk. This is probably the last topic today, is talk about testing. And this is a near and dear to my heart, because testing is so important in anything within Marketo, and anything that you do at all in a marketing environment. So let's look at content and let's look at testing. So first bullet point here is we have avoid spam content. I don't think I have to go into a lot of detail with marketing people on the line here as to why to avoid spam content. What is spam content? Well, there's a couple things that get emails to be viewed as spam. One is when they have very little text content. For example, if you have one really large image and that's your email, and all the text and everything is contained within that one image, a lot of email recipients, the email servers, will reject that because it's just all image and very little text, and that's a huge sign of spam. Be careful with your subject lines, using words like contest or win big, or things like that are words that a lot of times the email servers are looking for. So that's something that you just need to be careful of. I'm guessing I'm preaching to the choir out there with marketing people, that they know that this is an important piece. Check the from and subject lines. So make sure that your from and subject are exactly what you want it to be. A lot of times, Marketo will put a generic value into each of those. The reply to, the from, all that sort of thing, that sometimes you forget to update, especially the from and the reply to. I've seen issues where we couldn't figure out why an email wouldn't approve, and all of a sudden you take a look at the reply to or the from, and it's not in the correct format. A reply to and a from should be email addresses, and so they really shouldn't be names, because then it would get rejected by almost every email server out there. So Marketo doesn't let you approve it until you've actually gotten all that stuff right. Test the text and HTML versions. So when you do a send sample, there is a checkbox that asks if you want to send a text version as well. You should do this in most cases. I think we all do the HTML version, but send the text one out to yourself. Granted, you may not have a text client, but you can at least see what the text email looks like. Make sure it's functional in the way you want it to be. Just a good practice to do. If you're going to create a text version, you might as well test it. Think about, should it be operational? We talked about that. I think most of the time, in most cases, it should be non-operational, and we talked about a couple examples where it should be. Send test and send email to yourself. So what does that mean? Well, we do the send sample, right? We always want to do send sample and keep that in order. But the other thing that we need to keep in mind is that sometimes send sample can be slightly different than what the user actually sees. Marketo has done a lot to make that difference a lot less. This used to be a much bigger thing. They've made some improvements to send sample that allows it to now be a little closer to what you see in the regular send email. But what I always recommend is, do the send sample. That's great. Then go in and make, I'm assuming most people have created themselves as a lead. If not, create a lead that has your email address. And within lead database, you can actually go in and manually send an email to that one lead. Or you can create a campaign where you're the only member of the smart list and send to your email address the actual email as if you were a lead. And just make sure that looks okay too. Again, they've done a lot to make them very similar now to where there's not as much difference, and things that didn't used to work in the send sample now do work in the send sample, but I always like to play it safe and send out the real email as well to myself. Test all the links. This seems simple, but sometimes when you're in a rush, you look at your email, you say, yeah, this looks great, let's send it out. Even if it's the 5th revision and you've tested the links the first 4 times, and then you say, well, I don't need to test it the 5th time. You never know what changes can affect the links or anything else for that matter. So every time, test everything is the way I always look at it. So make sure you test the links. Make sure you test everything. Make sure that those tokens have default values. Substitute values. Make sure that there's something intelligent there, because by default it's just going to give, I forget what it is now, but it gives you some generic value in the default, which is not going to help at all when it shows up in an email. So make sure you have a default value, a substitute value for every token that you're using, be it in the email or in the subject line, or the from and reply to. Test this with images on and off. So a lot of email clients can allow you to turn images off, or they'll. Sorry, I had something pop up on my screen there. They'll allow you to turn images off in the case where you just don't want to get all that download happening, especially if it's a large image. So a lot of times what happens is images are turned off, and then you can right-click on it and download the image if you want, that sort of thing. So what I would usually say is, hey, if you have Outlook, for example, as a test, turn images off and look at the email. Right, send it to that client. Look at the email and just see how it looks. Right, it's not going to look great. When images are turned off, it's not going to look great. But just make sure it doesn't completely break everything to where it's just completely unreadable. It's a pretty narrow area to test. It's not everyone does this, but it's good to just check it. If you don't, the world isn't going to end, but definitely something to think about. And lastly, check the email on various browsers and email clients, as many as you can. And just, keep testing, try Gmail, try Outlook, try Yahoo, Hotmail, AOL, whatever, the hot email browsers are that you feel are important. Test it on all of them. You may even want to test it on different hardware. How does it look on a Mac? How does it look on a PC running Chrome as opposed to a Mac running Chrome? With Mac, you test Safari a little heavier. Things like that, right? Safari on Gmail, for example. So just something to think about, and a list of things that you can think about and keep in mind with the content and with the testing of your emails. So, I hope we've covered enough to really help you out here. There are so many topics that we could go into. And this could be a 2 or 3 hour webinar that we could have to go into all those topics. I wanted to hit on some of the bigger topics, some of the stuff that not everyone does or does in the way that maybe they should. So I'm hoping this was valuable to you. I did want to talk to you about the upcoming session, which is how to create engagement programs, which is next Thursday at the same time. This is the final session of our series. So, I hope you're able to join that. And we'll hopefully see you there. I'll turn it over to Courtney now for questions.
Great. Thanks, Eric. You really shared some great best practices and tips for sending and creating marketing emails, so thank you. At this time, we'll go ahead and open it up for question and answers. If you haven't already submitted your question, please do so now. We'll try to get to those. We do already have a couple of questions already. So the first question is from Doug. Isn't it dangerous to send an email to leads that aren't unsubscribed or that are unsubscribed?
That are unsubscribed. Well, the short answer is yes, it is. And yeah, don't let me downplay that any. It certainly is dangerous. You have to be sure that it matters in your scenario. You know, I mentioned the one about a company that I did some work for with financial services, and they absolutely had to send this email to everybody. Legally, they could get in trouble for not sending this email to everybody. So, you know, that's one scenario. Reactivation campaigns, you got to be really careful. They can be done, but you do want to consult your legal, especially with all the the Canadian laws, the upcoming GDPR in EMEA, specifically in the EU. So it's just some things you got to keep in mind, but definitely something, again, when you're not sending it as a marketing email, if it is not at all marketing to somebody, but just reaching out to them for a reason. That's really the difference in the two.
Great, thank you. So the next question is from Suze. There are a lot of email clients. Can I ever be sure my email works on all of them?
No, you can't. You can be close. You know, you can definitely test on everything that you can get your hands on. But there's a couple of things, right? One is testing on every email client is somewhat unrealistic. You can test on all the current ones. You could use a tool like, let's say, Litmus or something like that, that will show it in all the relatively modern browsers and clients. But there's a couple things, right? And one is you can't hit everything, but two, every email client is different. And from all the studies I've read and my own personal experience, there's always one email client where something doesn't work. You may do it and it works on 90% of the on the email clients, but it doesn't work on the other 10. And you make a correction so that it'll work on those other 10, and it breaks it for another 10. I have yet to see an email that you can positively absolutely say this works on everything, because there's always something different about an email client that's out there. There's always one email client that just doesn't support a specific functionality that you're doing.
Great. We do have one more question. It's from Sarah. Will view as web page work in all browsers?
That's a good question. So one of the reasons you want to test, I've never had a problem with it in the 4 major browsers: Chrome, Firefox, IE, and Safari. I've even seen it work in Edge, if we want to count that as part of IE or not. So it certainly appears to work in the major browsers. So I've never had a problem with it. If there's some odd browsers out there that are not used heavily, I can't necessarily speak to that, but I've never had a problem with it. Definitely, this comes back to the testing mantra that I have. Make sure you test that in at least the 4 major browsers. And you should be fairly safe at that point.
Good, great. So it looks like we'll go ahead and wrap up at this time. We do want to thank everyone again for joining us today. If you do have any questions or you'd like to request a health check from Show Me Leads, please feel free to contact us at info@showmeleads.com. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you at the next session.
Thank you, everyone.